Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our read aloud of Can You Forgive Her by Anthony Trollope. We are up to chapter 13. We are still in the very private abode of George Vavasor, and we are learning a little bit more about his dealings in the city, things that his nearest and dearest don't know. So we are up to a chapter called Mr. Grimes Gets His Odd Money. The handmaiden at George Vavasor's lodgings announced another gent, and when Mr. Scrooby entered the room in which were seated George and Mr. Grimes, the publican from the Handsome Man on the Brompton Road, Mr. Scrooby was an attorney from Great Marlborough Street, supposed to be very knowing in the ways of metropolitan elections, and he had now stepped round, as he called it, with the object of saying a few words to Mr. Grimes, partly on the subject of the forthcoming contest at Chelsea, and partly on that of the contest just past. These are the kind of grubby, jobbing men that run around underneath, tilling the soil underneath Victorian British elections. And no election is without them, as we're going to see. These words were to be said in the presence of Mr. Vavasor, the person interested. That some other words had been spoken privately between Mr. Scrooby and Mr. Grimes on the same subject behind Mr. Vavasor's back, I think very probable. But even though this might have been so, I am not prepared to say that Mr. Vavasor had been deceived by their combination. The two men were very civil to each other in their salutations, the attorney assuming an air of patronizing condescension, always calling the other Grimes, whereas Mr. Scrooby always treated with considerable deference by the publican, and was always called Mr. Scrooby. "Business is business," said the publican as soon as the salutations were over. "Isn't it now, Mr. Scrooby?" "And I suppose Grimes thinks Sunday morning a particularly good time for business?" said the attorney, laughing. "It is quiet, you know," said Grimes. "But it warn't me as named Sunday morning. It was Mr. Vavasor here. But it is quiet, ain't it, Mr. Scrooby?" Mr. Scrooby acknowledged that it was quiet, especially looking out over the river, and then they proceeded to business. "We must pull the governor through better next time than we did last," said the attorney. "Of course we must, Mr. Scrooby, but, Lord love you, Mr. Vavasor, whose fault was it? What notice did I get? Just tell me that. Why, Travers' name was up on the Liberal interest ever so long before the governor ever thought about it." "Nobody's blaming you, Mr. Grimes," said George. "And nobody can't, Mr. Vavasor. I done my work true as steel, and there ain't another man about the place as could have done it half as much. You ask Mr. Scrooby else. Mr. Scrooby knows if e'er a man in London does. I tell you what it is, Mr. Vavasor, them Chelsea fellows, who lives mostly down by the river, ain't like your Maryboners or your Finsburyites. It wants something of a man to manage them, don't it, Mr. Scrooby?" "Well, it wants something of a man to manage any of them, as far as my experience goes," said Mr. Scrooby. "Of course it do, and there ain't no one in London knows much more about it than you do, Mr. Scrooby. I will say that for you. But the long and the short of it is this: business is business, and money is money." "Money is money, certainly," said Mr. Scrooby. "There's no doubt in the world about that, Grimes. And a deal of it you had out in the last election." "No, I hadn't. Begging your pardon, Mr. Scrooby, for making so free. What I had in my own cheek is nothing to speak of. I wasn't paid for my time. That's what I wasn't. You look how a publican's business gets cut up at them elections, and then the state of the house afterwards. What would the governor say to me if I was to put down painting inside and out my little bill?" "It doesn't seem to make much difference how you put it down," said Vavasor. "The total is what I look at." "Just so, Mr. Vavasor, just so. The total is what I looks at too. I has to look at it the deuced longer time before I gets it. Ain't got it yet, have I, Mr. Vavasor?" "Well, if you ask me, I would say that you had," said George. "I know I paid Mr. Scrooby £300 on your account." "And I got every shilling of it, Mr. Vavasor. I am not a going to deny the money, Mr. Vavasor. You'll never find me doing that. I'm as round as your hat and as square as your elbow. I am. Mr. Scrooby knows me, don't you, Mr. Scrooby?" "Perhaps I know you too well, Grimes." No, you don't, Mr. Scrooby, not a bit too well. Nor I don't know you too well either. I respect you, Mr. Scrooby, because you're a man who understands your business. But as I was saying, what's £300 when a man's bill is 392.19 and fourpence? So we're getting this kind of, I'm using my hall for election purposes. People trash it. I went in extra on the paint. We're getting all sorts of this stuff. in George Vavasor's room, his dingy rooms in the back of a building on a Sunday, with these fixer-uppers and these minor operative men. I don't think it's a wise narrative choice. On Trollop's point, he likes to show us this world. I don't think it's all as interesting as he thinks it is. But then again, keep in mind, he dealt with this world unsuccessfully. So, I thought that was all settled, Mr. Scrooby, said Vavasor. Why, you see, Mr. Vavasor, it's very hard to settle these things. If you ask me whether Mr. Grimes here can sue you for the balance, I tell you very plainly that he can't. We were a little short of money when we came to a settlement, as is generally the case at such times, and so we took Mr. Grimes's receipt for £300. Of course you did, Mr. Scrooby. Not on account, but in full of all demands. Now, Mr. Scrooby, said the publican, and he made his appeal looked at the attorney with an expression of countenance which was absolutely eloquent. Are you going to put me off with such an excuse as that? So the look spoke plainly enough. Are you going to bring up my own signature against me when you know very well I shouldn't have got a shilling at all for the next 12 months if I hadn't given it? Oh, Mr. Scrooby. That's what Mr. Grimes's look said, and both Mr. Scrooby and Mr. Vavasor understood it perfectly. In full of all demands, said Mr. Scrooby, with the slight tone of triumph in his voice, as though to show that Mr. Grimes's appeal had no effect at all on his conscience. If you were to go into a court of law, Grimes, you wouldn't have a leg to stand on. This is what I mean. This has no dramatic import at all. It is not interesting, except maybe to Trollope. It's not important for the rest of the book. He just wants to show us this world and the mean, petty, grasping men who are in it. A court of law? Who's going to a court of law with the governor, I should like to know? Not I. Not if he didn't pay me them £92, 13 and 4 pence for the next 5 years. 5 years of 15 would make no difference, said Scrooby. You couldn't do it. And I ain't going to try. That's not the ticket I've come here about, Mr. Vavasor, this blessed Sunday morning. Going to law indeed, but Mr. Scrooby, I've got a family. Not in the Vale of Taunton, I hope, said George. They is at the Handsome Man at the Brompton Road, Mr. Vavasor, and I always feel that I owes them my first duty. If a man don't work for his family, what's he to work for? In Trollope, almost always. Not as consistently as in, for instance, George Gissing, but in Trollope, almost always, when a character says, if a man don't work for his family, what does he have to work for? The real answer is himself. Come, Grimes, said Mr. Scrooby. What is it you're at? Out with it, and don't keep us here all day. What is it I'm at, Mr. Scrooby? As if you didn't know very well what I'm at. There's my house. In all them in Chelsea districts, it's the most convenientest of all the publics. They're open for the manner of public elections. That's given up to it. And what's next? Said Scrooby. The next is I myself. There isn't one of the lot of them can work them Chelsea fellows down along the river unless it is me. Mr. Scrooby knows that. Why, I've been getting of them up with a view of this very job ever since they were talking of the Chelsea districts. When Lord Robert was coming in for the country on the religious dodge, he couldn't have worked them fellows anyhow. Only me. Mr. Scrooby knows that. Let's take it all for granted, Mr. Grimes, said Vavasor. What comes next? Well, them Bunratty people, it is them that comes next. They know which side of the bread is like to be buttered. They do. They're a bidding for the Handsome Man already. They are. And you'd let your house to the Tory party, Grimes? Said Mr. Scrooby, in a tone in which disgust and anger were blended. Grimes wants these people to know he's being courted. It's not necessarily theirs to take for granted. Who said anything of letting my house to the Tory party, Mr. Scrooby? I'm as round as your hat, Mr. Scrooby, and as square as your elbow. I am. But suppose as all the liberal gents as employs you, Mr. Scrooby, was to turn again you, and not pay you for your little bills, wouldn't you have your eyes open for customers of another kind? Come now, Mr. Scrooby. You won't make much of that game, Grimes. Perhaps not. Perhaps not. There's a risk in all these things, isn't there, Mr. Vavasor? I should like to see you a Parliament gent. I should indeed. You'd be a credit to the districts. I really think you would. I'm much obliged to you for a good opinion, Mr. Grimes, said George. When I sees a gent come forward, and I knows whether he's fit for Parliament and whether he ain't, I say you are fit. But Lord love you, Mr. Vavasor, it's a thing a gentleman always has to pay for. We're going to see that isn't always true. That's true enough. A deal more than it's worth, generally. A thing's worth what it fetches. I'm worth what I'll fetch. That's the long and the short of it. I want to have my balance. That's the truth. It's the odd money in a man's bill as always carries the profit. You ask Mr. Scrooby here. Only with a lawyer it's all profit, I believe. That's what you know about it, said Scrooby. If you cut off a man's odd money, continued the Republican, you break his heart. He'd almost as sooner have that as leave the other standing. In other words, he said, here's my bill for my place to use to help electing the governor. £300. And he was paid that. But it ran to more than that. It ran to odd money. It ran to 300 and something. And he wants the and something. And he's telling them now, it's that most of the time, a man who goes to lengths like this, as I've done, would rather have the and something than the main part of the bill. It's just ridiculous. He'd call the hundreds capital. And if he lost them at last, why, he'd put it down to his being in the way of trade. But the odd money, he looks at that, Mr. Vavasor, in a manner very sweat of his brow, the work of his own hand. That's what goes to his family and keeps the pot boiling downstairs. Never stop a man's odd money, Mr. Vavasor, that is, unless he comes in it very strong indeed. And what is it you want now? Said Scrooby. I wants £92, 13 and 4pence, Mr. Scrooby, and then we'll go to work for the new fight with contented hearts. If we're to begin at all, it's quite time. It is indeed, Mr. Vavasor. And what you mean us to understand is that you won't begin at all without your money, said the lawyer. That's about it, Mr. Scrooby. Take a £50 note, Grimes, said the lawyer. £50 notes are not so ready, said George. Oh, he'll be only too happy to have your acceptance, won't you, Grimes? Grimes doesn't want to walk out with no money. Especially not the promise of money from George Vavasor, who might as well be a stranger. Nobody knows where he gets his money, or how much of it there is. No wonder George is thinking about renewing his affections to Alice. A ready source of money. Not for £50, Mr. Scrooby. It's the odd money that I wants. I don't mind the 13 and 4, because that's neither here nor there among friends. But if I don't get all them £92, I should be a broken-hearted man. I should indeed. Mr. Vavasor, I couldn't go on about your work for the next year or so as you do justice among your electors. I couldn't. They need him. They need him. He's a publican. He has a hall. He has an open space where men already go, and he's already working on those men in favor of the next election. They need him. So it's not just nothing, him saying, well, if I don't get the 90-something pounds of odd money that I'm owed, I probably will go in with the other people, not with you. When he says that, it's not an idle threat. It just doesn't need to be heard. We don't need it. Not all this is immaterial. We don't need to know any of this. You'd better give him a bill for £90 at 3 months, Mr. Vavasor. I have no doubt he has got a stamp in his pocket. This is the Victorian way. If you don't have the ready cash, you hand someone a bill, you signorize it, and they're legally bound by it. That I have, Mr. Scrooby. There ain't no mistake about that. A bill stamp is a thing that often turns up convenient when gents as mean business like Mr. Vavasor and you. But you must make it 92. You must indeed, Mr. Vavasor, and do make it 2 months if you can. They do charge so unconscionable on 90 days at them branch banks. They do indeed. George Vavasor and Mr. Scrooby, between them, yielded at last, so far as to allow the bill to be drawn for £92, but they were staunchest at the time. If it must be, it must be, said the publican with a deep sigh as he folded up the paper and put it into the pocket of a huge case which he carried. And now, gents, I'll tell you what it is. We'll make safe work of this here next election. We know what's to be our little game in time, and if we don't go in and win, my name ain't Jacob Grimes, and I ain't the landlord of the Handsome Man in the Brompton Road. As you gents have perhaps got something to say amongst yourselves, I'll make so bold as to wish you good morning. So with that, Grimes lifted his hat from the floor, bowed himself out of the room. Notice, we were told that George Vavasor is not an inhospitable man. But where is his hat? It's on the floor. You couldn't have done it cheaper. You couldn't, indeed, said the lawyer, as soon as the sound of the closing front door had been heard. Well, perhaps not, but what a thief that man is. I remember you telling me that the bill was about to be the most preposterous you'd ever seen. So it was, and if we hadn't wanted him again, of course we shouldn't have paid him. But we'll have it all off him next account, Mr. Vavasor, every shilling of it. It's only lent, that's all, it's only lent. But one doesn't want to lend such a man money if one can help it. That's true. if you look at it in that light, it's quite true. But you see, we cannot do without him. If he hadn't got your bill, he'd have gone over to the other fellows before the week was over. The worst of it would have been that he knows our hand. Looking at it all round, you've got him cheap, Mr. Vavasor. You have indeed. But we don't know that George Vavasor has 90 pounds. We don't know anything more about him than strangers do. Right. You can't do it for cheap for any of these metropolitan seats. You can't, indeed, Mr. Vavasor. That is a new man can't. It's an established man certainly can't do it for cheap. When you've been in 4 or 5 times, like old Duncombe, why then, of course, you may snap your fingers at such men as Grimes, but the Chelsea districts ain't dear. I don't call them that by any means dear. Now, Marylebone is dear, and so is Southwark. But dear and nasty, that's what the borough is. Only that I'll never tell tales. I could tell you a tale, Mr. Vavasor, that would make your hair stand on end. I could indeed. Ward politics. Basically, that's what this is. Once upon a time, Boston was like that. The game is hardly worth the candle, I believe, said George. That depends on the way you choose to look at it. A seat in Parliament is a great thing to a man who wants to make his way, a very great thing. Especially when a man's young like you are, Mr. Vavasor. Young, said George. Sometimes it seems to me as though I've been living for 100 years. But I won't trouble you with that, Mr. Scrooby, and I believe I needn't keep you any longer. With that he got up and bowed the attorney out of the room with just a little more ceremony than he had shown to the publican. Young, said Vavasor to himself when he was left alone. There's my uncle, or the old squire, they're both younger than I am. One cares for his dinner, and the other for his bullocks and his trees. But what is there that I care for, unless it is not getting among the sheriff's officers for debt? Okay, so George is not only a disreputable man, but a low man. He needs Alice's money. He tells himself that he doesn't. He says, I mainly want her to put a thumb in the eye of John Grey, but that's not true. Then he took out a little memorandum book from his breast pocket, and having made in it an entry as to the amount and date that the bill which he had just accepted on the publican's behalf, he conned over the particulars of its pages. Very blue indeed, he said to himself when he had completed the study, but nobody shall say I hadn't the courage to play the game out, and that old fellow must die some day, one supposes. If I were not a fool, I should make it up with him before he went, but I am a fool, and I shall remain so to the last. If he made it up with that old fellow, he might get an allowance. He might have some money incoming. Soon after that, he dressed himself slowly, reading a little every now and then as he did so. When his toilet was completed and his Sunday newspaper sufficiently perused, he took up his hat and umbrella and sauntered out. So there we have a chapter, a make-weight chapter, admittedly. It's always fun to read Trollope, but he was doing this in serial installments first, before it was a book, and sometimes your wife has an afternoon appointment, or you've got to leave town, or the flow of ideas just isn't coming. Or in this case, maybe Trollope wants to exorcise some ghosts, some political ghosts, these grubby political operatives and the publicans with their open houses and their pliable loyalties. Maybe so. Who knows? But anyway, we'll move on next time, hopefully to meatier matters. I know that I've told a lot of you that some major characters have not yet been introduced, even though we're well along in this book. That is true. Keep in mind, this is a very long book. We're only that far along. We're getting some major characters who have not appeared yet, and they won't for some time. But we'll shift focus away from George Vavasor, at least, and see what we can do with that. So I'll see you then. Thank you, Booked.